This is Wes Holler with H6 Law, and you're listening to The Ascent with Crestmont Private Wealth.
The opinions expressed are those of the host. The material is for informational purposes only. It does not constitute investment advice, and it is not intended as an endorsement for any specific investment. Visit crestmontpw.com for more details.
You're listening to The Ascent with Crestmont Private Wealth. This is Alec Walker, EVP of Financial Planning, coming to you from our Houston recording studio. I hope that everyone survived the storms and flooding that came through the San Antonio and Hill Country area during the week. We're, kind of approaching the dog days of summer. That it's getting hot. The sports calendar is going to be cooling off after the World Cup ends on Sunday. And so we're going to be kind of turning our attention to internally at Crestmont, kind of the start of the school year. We'll be doing our annual 529 college planning review for our clients that have 529 accounts, where we're going to be taking a look at where they are tracking towards their funding goals and if they need to make any adjustments to their contributions or allocations. So, be on the lookout for another episode in the coming weeks where we might dive deeper into 529 specifically. Today, we're going to talk a little bit more broadly just about saving for children in general, as well as a quick quarterly market recap and kind of a look ahead for what we're watching in the markets over the coming 6 months. So we sent out a newsletter to our clients earlier this week talking about saving strategies for children or grandchildren, more specifically. And that was kind of just on some of the news, finally, with these new Trump accounts we talked about on some previous episodes. Those are now officially formalized. We've had a couple clients reach out over the last few weeks with questions on those accounts. So just kind of wanted to talk a little bit more in depth on those accounts specifically, as well as other savings options. So a quick recap, what is a Trump account? These are new savings accounts designed to help children start building wealth from an early age. One of the neat things is that eligible children born between 2025 and 2028 would actually also receive a $1,000 government-funded contribution to their account to get that started. One of the really big unique things here is there's no earned income required for this account. Obviously, a newborn is not going to be working, so the child doesn't have to work for the parents or grandparents or family members to contribute to that account. The maximum amount that parents and grandparents can contribute to this account is $5,000 per year, and the investments grow tax deferred over time. So very similar to an IRA account or a Roth IRA account. Again, the big difference here is the child doesn't have to have any earned income to contribute to this account. There's a couple other nuances as well. You may have heard Michael Dell is offering an additional $250 contribution for children who did not qualify for that $1,000 contribution. This contribution is for children that are 10 and under. And there's some household income limitations as well, which is dependent upon your zip code and the relative income in those areas. So the way that, if you end up thinking that this account makes sense for you, you can go to trumpaccounts.gov and there's a QR code that you scan to download an app. And I believe from what the instructions say within that app is you can actually file and submit the IRS form that is required to open that Trump account. And if you qualify for that $1,000 or $250 contribution as well. So definitely a strategy to consider, but you kind of have to compare this to other strategies for kids. The other main ones are obviously going to be a 529 account, which is more specific to college planning, a UTMA account or a uniform transfer to minors account. This is a custodial account where you as the parent or the grandparent are the custodian of this account. You manage it and control it for the child or grandchild until they become of age, which is age 21 in Texas, at which point that account would transition fully over to them. And then maybe it's a Roth IRA account. This is for kids with earned income, maybe teenagers that are working. And then in addition, kind of a new account as well is Schwab just released these teen accounts for children aged 13 to 17. So this is an account where similar to a UTMA, but it's actually owned by the child and you as the parent are just kind of supporting them during that management. So how do we kind of view these Trump accounts? I kind of view the account structure as it sits today as a little bit more of a luxury account versus maybe a 529 or a UTMA, but definitely a Roth IRA account for a child that's got some earned income. I think the benefits there for a Roth IRA outweigh it. The reason being is that for a Trump account, yes, you can contribute $5,000 per year. There's, no earned income requirements, but you cannot take any withdrawals from that account until the child is at least 18 years old. And then once they reach 18, the distribution rules are treated just like a traditional IRA account. So when we think about prioritization and planning, a lot of the times the big goals that parents are trying to provide and save for their children is number one going to be college planning. And so a 529 really is much more advantageous if your specific goal for your child is 529 planning. You get that tax deferred growth and tax-free distribution if used for qualified educational expenses. Now, IRAs, you can take a distribution, an early distribution for qualified educational expenses and avoid that 10% penalty, but the full distribution is going to be taxed as ordinary income. So if you're taking $30,000 out of your IRA for tuition that year, that $30,000 is going to be taxed as ordinary income to the child. Whereas taking a $30,000 distribution for tuition from a 529 is going to be completely tax-free for the parent taking that distribution. So of course, as we talked about some of the new rules for 529s that allow a portion of unused funds to be converted to a Roth IRA, kind of helps with some of the benefits of the child not ending up needing the funds. So again, we really like to be more specific with what the goals are and use the account that best meets those goals. So if college planning is your goal, still think the 529 is superior. Next, we get to the UTMA account. Some parents don't like some of the restrictions of the 529. They realize some of the tax benefits, but they want their child to have a little bit more flexibility. Maybe they want that child to be able to save money in an account. When they're 21, they have full control over it. They could use it for tuition expenses. They could use it to buy a new car, to start a business, to put a down payment on a home. A UTMA account is going to be taxed just like a regular investment account. At the point when they use it, they're likely going to be subject to simply long-term capital gains taxes on withdrawing the funds there. So not ordinary income taxes, not any 10% penalty. So there's a bit more flexibility there. UTMA accounts, people like those when they put a premium on flexibility. So then we kind of get to the Trump accounts. Again, like I said, these are kind of treated like a traditional IRA. If you feel like you've already got your 529 or college planning taken care of, or you're not worried about college savings and you're saying, hey, my child's going to figure it out with, student loans or work through college just like I did. And then number two, you don't prioritize the flexibility of the UTMA, or you've already got that taken care of as well. Then you kind of get to the Trump account. If you're thinking, I've got the first two boxes checked, I'm more kind of focusing on getting my child a head start on their long-term retirement planning, then I think the Trump account is a great option. Where I think in particular, it could be a really great strategy is a giving strategy for grandparents that, maybe their children are taking the lead on the college planning. They've got that taken care of. The grandparents already like to do some gifting annually to the children, to their grandchildren, but they want to give in a little bit more impactful and long-term manner. Funding the Trump account could be a great strategy. And that's where I think Crestmont and our financial planning team really excel with our multi-generational family planning. We like to, as much as possible, get all three, sometimes four generations of the family involved in strategic gifting and multi-generational planning. So if your grandparents are thinking about ways to help your child for future retirement planning, talking with your children on opening a Trump account and making annual gifts into that account could be a great strategy to explore. So like I said, if you have any questions about a Trump account, your specific situation, should you be prioritizing a 529, a UTMA, please reach out to us via info@crestmontpw.com. You're listening to The Ascent with Crestmont Private Wealth. This is Alec Walker. We were talking a little bit about Trump accounts and how we kind of view those when you're saving for your children or grandchildren and multi-generational planning. I wanted to quickly do a brief market recap of what happened in the second quarter and looking ahead into the second half of the year. So I'm looking at this chart right here, the S&P 500, showing the index's performance from April through June. So on April 7th, oil peaked at $115 per barrel, kind of near the heights of the conflict with Iran, which has gone off and on, and currently we sit back on. So you can imagine a lot of uncertainty at that time. Well, if we look ahead on this chart, May 29th, the S&P 500 had just posted its 9th consecutive weekly gain after oil peaked at $115 a barrel. And on June 2nd, S&P 500 closed at an all-time high. Obviously, it was a positive quarter, but it just kind of goes to show how volatile and uncertain the markets are. And we've got a chart coming out next week just about how predictions and forecasts can change quickly and why we don't want to adjust our portfolios based on simply one forecast or one economic indicator. And then we had SpaceX IPO back in June. That price, as we kind of talked about, it skyrocketed way up, limited supply, lots of demand, people with a fear of missing out. The price of that stock has kind of come back down right around what the IPO levels were. So our predictions so far have kind of held up on that. We'll see how things progress going forward. Obviously, a very long-term potential growth industry there with space exploration. So looking ahead in the market, what are some things that we're going to be monitoring in the second half of the year? Like I said, it seems the conflict with Iran has kicked back up. And so what happens with inflation in the second half of the year? Inflation rose in Q2. We had a cooler reading this past month in June that came out earlier this week. So that was positive. Energy prices have fallen back. But will the decline in oil prices, will that remain, or will oil prices start to rise and put more pressure on inflation? If inflation does kick back up and remain heavy, we could see interest rates actually rise and the Fed increase rates. Right now, the market is forecasting an increase in interest rates from the Fed. I'm cautiously optimistic that they will remain flat. The second thing we're going to be looking at is, can the artificial intelligence build out continue to go? We are seeing AI spending are driving record semiconductor rallies. The spending of technology companies is outpacing the build out of the late 1990s. So we're seeing a ton of capital expenditures from, kind of the mega cap companies, your Microsoft, Googles, Amazons, Metas. A lot of the spending that they're doing is funneling some of the growth that we've seen in these semiconductor companies. So the semiconductor companies like Micron, Broadcom, Texas Instruments, some of these kind of software and memory stocks are really being fueled by a lot of that spending. So will that spending turn into profits for these companies, or will it take longer? And then the third thing is, will the market breadth continue to broaden? As we've talked about, the S&P 500 is up about 10.2% through the halfway point of the year, but the S&P 400 mid caps are up 17.3%. Small cap stocks are up about 22%. International ex-US is up 16.6%. So we've seen a broadening out in growth from companies outside of just the S&P 500. We'd like to see if that continued, as we talked about in our rebalance earlier this year. We did expand our diversification outside of that sector in hopes of that widening breadth. If you have any questions about saving for children and that multi-generational planning, please reach out to our team via info@crestmontpw.com. Thank you for listening. Take care.